Welcome, Chris. It's fabulous to have you here. And you and I were talking very briefly to set this conversation as having a lot of fun and making it as
Yes.
non-conforming as possible. So welcome.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm really excited to be here, and uh, I'm I have no idea what's about to happen, and that's exciting to me. Yeah.
Indeed. And actually, I mean, again, for me, this is the second year of going into Audacious Conversations. And I just disclosed to you that the main purpose of me setting them all up last year was to have conversations with people I love, and, make them as fun and as practical and as audacious as possible. So
Yep.
you and I share, I mean, again, for whoever is joining us online or offline later, we are participants, or we belong to the 4PC, which is, Rich Litvin's community of high-level leaders and coaches. And so we know each other well. You've also a character in my book, The Audacity Spectrum, and we can talk about that later a little bit if that's where it takes us. But yes, let's go with the flow. That's what's audacious about this. And the other thing about, my definition of audacity is this sort of three pillars: care, courage, and non-conformity. So, and we can go whichever way, and maybe we can come back. Which is the one that speaks to you most?
So, what I moved in this moment is to share my relationship with the word audacious, right? So, and this is why it's been fun for you and I to talk at times, and my own connection with that. So, my relationship with audaciousness became clear to me one day when I was part of a conversation around identity. And my answer at that time as to what my identity was would have been entrepreneur, father, and husband. And it was sort of challenged to me at that time with those aren't actually my identity. Those are roles that I inhabit, and some of them are I've been in for a long time and maybe for the rest of my life. And it left me wondering, well, geez, this is how I see myself as an entrepreneur, father, husband. And if I'm not that, then what am I? Like this is like deep thought, right? So, and then that night I'm laying in bed and, like you're half awake, half asleep. And this word kind of bubbled out of the ether, right? In an answer to like, who am I, or what am I, or what is my identity? And it was the word audacious, it just kind of showed up, right? So then I Googled, what is the definition of audacious? Willing to take surprisingly bold risks. And that resonated with me. So I'm hearing your definition of audaciousness, but that's my personal connection to it. And then as I sat with that definition of being willing to take surprisingly bold risks, I started to think about my life, and these moments that have happened in my life. And I realized every key moment in my life, there's been this moment of audacity, and I was able to retroactively prove it to myself, and this goes all the way back to when I was 12 years old. I was 12 years old, grade 7, walking home from school, and this computer and video game store is opening up the next day or week or something like that. And something in me got me to walk in the store, open the door. It was opening soon. It wasn't even open yet, and I walk in and there's two people there and I asked them for a job, so like this little, like this audacious request from a 12-year-old kid. And I asked them if they needed help. And then they said, no, but I didn't take no for an answer. The only strategy I had as a 12-year-old was just tell them I'll work for free. And the owner kind of sat, and I guess he, in that moment, was struck by my audaciousness in that moment, saw something in me and said, okay, well, we could use someone building joysticks, from parts. That moment in my life changed my life. The entire trajectory of my life changed from that audacious moment of walking in that store, because everything has happened to me since, and I'm now 50 years old. So this is an almost 40-year-old story. Everything in my life is traced to that one audacious act. And then I have several other stories like it. So, yeah.
I love it, Chris. And actually, it's so true. I mean, it is the audacity or audaciousness, as per the dictionary, it is the bold risks. And for sure, I know you for that. For me, I wanted to add this extra dimensions to it, and it's
for sure.
It's a big part of taking bold risks. But your story reminded me that actually is also your identity, or at least the way I know you. It is this audacity to not accept the first no that's been given to you, and actually that's the it is audacious to find ways to circumvent that. No, it's a non-conformity. How can we make that happen? And I listened to a podcast recently, actually, and it was this concept of the reality distortion field. There's great leaders who, it's like Steve Jobs, I think, is one example. They don't accept the no. They always find a way to make that happen, and they get everybody else around them to believe that too.
Yeah, the words like "that can't be done" like fire me up, right? Or someone saying you can't do that, or anytime I hear anything like that, it lights a defiance in me of I'll show you. And again, I have like this history now of doing this like many times. Even just my life story of the reinvention that I've, so I started in this little store when I was 12 years old. I worked for that company until I was 20 years old. And I learned a lot about business through them. But then I became a rave DJ, in the 1990s. I felt passionate for music. I wanted to share this new style of music that was popular at the time, or sorry, not popular, but I wanted it to be more popular, called happy hardcore, and I ended up sending demo tapes to major record labels. I had no experience or reputation or anything like that. And the next thing you know, this record label from Los Angeles, the biggest electronic music label in the world at that time, Moonshine Music, the president calls me up and says, "Chris, we got your tape. We'd love it. We'd love to do something with this. Would you be open to doing something with us?" So here I am, and I played it so cool as a cucumber, I think that might be something I'd be interested in, that CD and series went on to become the best-selling electronic music series of the 1990s. It was called Happy to Be Hardcore. It sold over 400,000 copies. I started by sending out unsolicited demo tapes when I played at my launch party in Los Angeles 6 months later, that was like one of the first gigs I ever had, like out in public, in front of people. And I didn't let that stop me, like the story of why that can't be done or why I shouldn't do it.
Yeah, the why not that you and I share. Yeah. It's interesting. I think this is a story that I featured in my book, in the chapter of assertiveness, which, that chapter is about this fortitude to say no. It's all about the no's. And I absolutely love that story. But one of the things I would love to explore with you is this, freedom to fail, because I think that is your new mission, certainly at the end of 2025. Yes. So tell us more.
Yeah, so I've had this long string of successes, and reinventions, and I went from being, this world famous DJ and rave promoter to comedy hypnosis. It's just so. I encourage people to look me up because you can read more about this. But basically, I did the same thing. I took a weekend of training, and the next thing I know, I contacted my local TV stations and I told them I would be a great guest on their morning news shows, and they had me on. And now I'm on television doing this thing, and I have like all the prestige of doing that, and it turned into this whole other career. And then after that, I co-founded a tech company with my hypnosis teacher and mentor. So you got a couple, like this former DJ hypnotist with his hypnotist mentor, launching this webinar company called stealthseminar.com, which we just sold this past year to $100 million private equity fund. Like why not, And now I've had this long string of success, and I started to play with, well, what would failure look like for me at this point, right? So because I don't let fail. There's obviously in my story, there's a ton of no's, like but I don't dwell on them, and they're not important, right? So, but at the same time, I feel like I'm kind of wearing a golden handcuffs of success. They're with me now. So I decided to make a declaration for 2025, which has just begun, that this will be my year of failure. And I'm willing to fail big, and I'm willing to fail in public, and I'm willing to try to do things that I don't even think will succeed, but I'm willing to just try anyways. So that was my declaration. Yeah.
Yeah. So you're going to fail at this show altogether. That's what you and I were laughing about.
I was wondering, yeah. So I'm allowing myself to fail right now with you. I'm not even sure what that would look like. But,
I know we were sort of playing whatever that looks like.
Coming into this without preparing, coming into this, like just allowing this conversation to flow whichever way, for sure.
But I wanted to grab something that you actually said, because you just said, that I don't, I don't spend too much time on those no's. They're not important. And I was going to disagree with you publicly, because I do think those no's are important. Of course, it's that resilience to accept a no. It's the resilience to give a no, which, I'm okay with accepting no's. Interestingly, my challenge, as you know, is giving no's. It's not an easy muscle for me. So you may be thinking, oh yeah, that's okay. But not many people have actually got that muscle so trained that they are okay with 1,000 no's for the massive yes.
Because I've learned through a lifetime of working this, I detach myself from the outcome. So I create a victory in the action, so whatever it was, making an ask, and I get to celebrate that I asked, right? So, and I make the no's irrelevant, and I get to feel good about myself, and I focus on what it is that I have control over.
And I love that. For the audience, you and I, as a practical thing, to have this ability to celebrate the ask and not be, taken back by the no, that's a huge ability. Yeah.
I have a 20-year-old daughter in college looking for work currently, resorted to just walking into stores in my neighborhood cold, right? Like to walk in, ask for the owner, talk to them, hand them a resume. That's the victory, right? Like not getting the job. I was like, most people would not even be willing to walk into those stores and ask to speak to an owner. So that muscle that you're working right now, whether or not you find a job in our neighborhood or whatever, that's the victory, right? So, and that's going to serve you.
Yeah, and I'm sure, I sort of listening to all of the incredible, successful entrepreneurs, I think this is what they have in common, is this ability to be okay with 1,000, definitely with 1,000 no's.
And to not. So the first thing I tried to fail at this year is this idea that you and I had a conversation going back a couple of years ago, and you said, Chris, you need to find a TEDx or something like that, to get on stage. And I remember but immediately I was like, forget TEDx. It has to be TED, like the TED, like just go straight to the end, jump right to the end. I felt good. Like in that conversation with you, I felt really energized. I felt really good, felt very aligned. And of course it would be that, because that's how I play. But then 2 years passes and I didn't do anything with that idea. I didn't follow up with it. So then as I was playing around with this year of failure and what are things I could fail at, I came up with this idea. Okay, I'm going to fail at getting on the TED stage. And the victory is overcoming the story in my head about why I shouldn't. I got nothing new to say that hasn't already been said. What's there's people way more qualified. You got Nobel laureates. You have this person, captains of industry. Who am I? I had to overcome all of that story, right? And I went to the TED nomination page and I looked at the form and I was just like, you know what? I want the story of the nomination. That's So and then whatever happens after that. And the topic that I nominated myself to speak to is this topic, about creating a game that you win the moment you decide to play it. If I get selected to speak at TED, I will share the story of how I got to TED, like that I overcame the story in my own head, and when I pressed submit on that form, I won the game that I had created for myself.
Good. I love that. Again, it's a sort of practical, because you're right. It is celebrating the victory of you pressing the button, and then, the sort of the why not. And that's in itself. It's, how many of us just, they have this internal narrative, this internal voice that we're sort of not good enough. And you reminded me, because, Mandy Leto, who's our friend, she was on the live 2 weeks ago, and it was a similar but different angle. I think we were talking about this willingness to disappoint, which is looking at the same thing but through a different lens.
Well, because right now I have not been selected to speak at TED, so all I have is the failure. like that's all I have, and yet we're both smiling about it, So because no one was at my door banging on the door saying, "Don't you dare submit that," So the only gatekeeper was me, right? So and I had to overcome what like the why, and what is it that I have to offer. And again, it's this topic, and to make it very meta, because that's how I like to operate. And I like to, you're watching me do things like real time as this conversation's talking about. And and I took a screenshot of the submitted form, and that was the victory on that day, even though technically it's a failure because they haven't actually followed up with me yet. And we don't know what will happen. However, they could say yes.
Absolutely. I mean, it's actually, it's a quite a high chance they could say yes. And as you said, what you have, your big gain is once the story that you and I can talk about, and then you could talk about it on many different stages. It doesn't have to be TED. You can talk about it. So that's definitely one gain. And two is the confidence of, if you can do something like this, there's many other things that you could do.
For sure. Yeah. Like what other stages are out there? What other things? And if I can overcome whatever internal conflict I have about why I shouldn't speak on a TED itself, like the main TED stage, that's now a muscle that I've practiced. So and when we talk about collecting the no's and being okay with it, like I am now stronger for having gone through this particular process. Yes,
and you and I am, talking about failing out loud and live. We're playing this game, you and I, because you're the person who's okay. You okay with lots of no's, and I'm the opposite of you. So I say yes to everything, and that's a challenge in itself. So we both can learn from each other in that way. So I'm curious, if you were to fail at something, what would you say yes to again?
Can you ask me that again? I just
want. So I think it's for me. It's like if you had to just to practice that muscle of yes. Yes. You went big TED. But what else? What else could you say yes to? About talking about committing yourself in this moment that feels uncomfortable and edgy.
Well, I have a natural pull towards the big stages, right? So I like things that have stories attached to them. This TED story is a story that here we are sharing it live in front of people, right? So so more scary to me, I'm just being real in this moment, is the ordinary, right? So so what's the ordinary yes that I could say yes to? That would be scary for me. I'm scared even admitting that because I'm afraid of what's going to show up because of it. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. What could be ordinary actually for you that it's sort of scary to say yes to? I'm curious.
Help me in this moment, Alina. Okay, and
no,
okay,
I'm letting you fail.
Exactly. No, so I'm failing right now answering that question, and I don't have a nice package story to offer you in response to that. So I am squirming right now in my seat because I don't have a simple, nice thing. So look at that, right? So I'm, and then even in that pause that I took as I'm trying to come up with an answer, there's a lot of pressure on me to give you the perfect answer, and here it is. And I like blowing people away. Like I acknowledge that. So, but then being ordinary, I have to kind of let go a little bit. And so I feel like, even just kind of sitting in it I'm failing to answer you.
Yeah, and I wonder whether, I mean, again, we're playing, and I love playing, in a way, sort of. But because you, I think you going, we talked about TED, and you going to the stage, and that's extraordinary. What would be ordinary?
Yeah.
Maybe it's something else even simpler than that. That for some reason, it feels so ordinary, and you're still not wanting to say yes to.
Okay, so what's now popping up is we are on LinkedIn. So there's a story that I've carried about LinkedIn that I don't belong. I don't belong. I'm a weirdo. I'm a misfit. Pick your label, pick your word. I deleted my account many years ago, and I didn't have a LinkedIn profile for a long time because I thought I didn't belong there, and it's for professionals, and I'm the odd weirdo. I've only recently created an account on LinkedIn. It's allowed me to have experiences like having this conversation with you, people I know are on LinkedIn. That's been valuable. And I'm a naturally reclusive person. I prefer being on the big stage. I like being under the lights and stuff like that. That's my medium. I have much more difficulty in smaller groups. So in this moment, the ordinary ask is to find connection with people on LinkedIn, because my connection, like if you look up my profile right now, I don't have 500 plus. I have 60. Listener, viewer, would you like to connect with me on LinkedIn and connect with me? That's something for me.
Fabulous. Uncomfortable, but why not? I mean, and when you say, it's interesting, you're saying I've only got 60, but you only just open an account, Chris.
Right. So I'm giving into story. I am comparing myself with people who are established and have been on LinkedIn for many, many years at this point. And there's a narrative. So I'm calling myself out, right? So I've fallen into the comparisonitis. Even in my short time on LinkedIn, it's still, I mean, I'm a human being, and this is, it's going to show up, right? So, and I'm someone who's avoided social media, so I don't have a lot of practice at creating social networks or anything. And this is interesting right now to even just speak that.
And I celebrate you for that. I really honor and celebrate you for making that yes request, because for you it's okay to be in the no land, but actually what, and again, we're sort of free to fail. We're just exploring that. If nobody connects with you, so what? But
right,
it's
sorry, let me interrupt you. I won by speaking it, you know what I mean? So I came up with an ordinary, like, be ordinary, Chris. Be someone just seeking connection on LinkedIn, not looking for TED or, Davos or whatever, you know what I mean? Like, I guess I hope that people might resonate with me and with my story and want to be connected to me. And I have to be okay that maybe nobody does.
Yes, I think you have. It's interesting you saying that. And I'm going to use a comparison, although sort of the comparisonitis, as you said, because you only just have been on LinkedIn for a few months now. You've got 60. I, as part of this project, the Audacious Conversations project, which I set up, February last year, and I originally had it. I just thought I'm going to do it for 12 months, and then I enjoyed it so much that I carried it into 25. But I've created a YouTube channel as a depository for all of this, as you're now my number 29. So, Mandy was 28. And where do I keep these things? Because I don't have a podcast. And again, I think I've got about 40 subscribers to that. But for me, it was never about people subscribing. It's about just holding them in a place. But I shall follow your role modeling. So if anybody watches and they dare, just subscribe to that. I'd love to have, again, totally detached and free to fail, but that would be a nice thing to have.
I find it interesting that you say you don't have a podcast, and yet this essentially is one in all but name. Yeah.
Indeed, but actually, I think technically, you're not talking about the non-conformity and being unconventional. Technically, this is not. It does the same. I don't have to have everything that comes with the production of a podcast, because all of the editing, this is not edited. It's like whatever you see now is what you're going to get. There's no edits. And again, for me, I was talking to Mandy 2 weeks ago. When I set the intention for 25, I have my 3 E's, but ease is one of them. So I don't want the big production. So I'm continuing with this. For me, experimentation is, I love that, and I'll continue to do that. And this is one experimenting project. And then the other one that I'm always holding on is excellence, and you and I were talking about that. That's why it's uncomfortable sometimes to let go and be okay with failing, even if it's not excellent.
For sure. There's a cat at my door. I'm going to fail right now at being all polished and professional. I'm trying to stay engaged with you. There's a cat at my door trying to leave my room. So I'm going to fail at being professional.
Fail at being professional. I love that. You should just share your cat with us, Chris.
Okay, well, he's gone now. But so in that, okay, so just you're talking, I'm listening to you, I'm focused on this camera, and there's this cat like meowing and trying to leave my office, and I'm wrestling with, in a sense, I'm on stage or whatever. So don't ever acknowledge anything that's happening off camera, be a professional.
You failed.
I failed at being a professional.
Let's call it that way. You failed. Talk about in life, but it's acknowledging. It's being real. I mean, as I said, and then once you set the intention, there's many ways of us playing with that concept. But
for sure, this is and it starts getting when you learn to be okay with the failing part. Like, we're laughing about it. It's fun, and whereas until I share that there's just something happening with this cat, I'm internally fighting it, right? So, so I turned it from this internal wrestle, like that no one is even aware of, to levity, and so that's a lesson for me, like right now, like real time.
True, and actually that brings you, if you have the courage, Shoma, we're going back to that, the courage to acknowledge that in the moment, and of course you're in choice. You could just stay here and be tense for the last 5 minutes, and that's possible, or you could just acknowledge that and come back relaxed and levity, as you said, and enjoy it.
We're using the word failure, but it's fun. We're taking the power away from failure as this thing to avoid at all costs, and it could just be part of everything.
And actually, I mean, people who know me well, intimately well, and my team, and when I do my corporate workshops, I always refer to failure as feedback. I always play with this. I say they both start with an F. And you could call it failure, or you could call it feedback, because the whole thing about experimentation for me is, yes, there is so-called failure, but then it's a feedback then you're getting back, and from there you can build on, you can change direction, you can build on what was done, and that's very I feel really very, very strongly about that concept of reinforcement and just flipping it on its head.
Well, there's this sort of insidious belief that we all kind of absorb, that failure and success are polar opposites, and it's not true at all, right? So, I think anyone who's had any level of success would tell you failure was an essential part of it, and I certainly would. And yet here I am still fighting. I'm still fighting against failure. So I
mean, we all understand it at the abstract level, but it's the two sides of the same coin, isn't it? In order to succeed, you do have to be willing to fail, to be free to fail, as you said, explore that concept. So fabulous. So Chris, if there is any, I suppose one thing for you to sum it all up for us in terms of, our 30 minutes of fun conversation, what would that be?
You just mentioned the word fun. So explore the fun of failure. As I feel we just did in real time.
Yeah, no, I love that. I love that. And I suppose sort of finishing it all off with our, audacious request for connection, as uncomfortable as that is, connecting with you on LinkedIn, following the, us on YouTube, this particular conversation and all of the other ones. And connect with us and have fun.
Yeah, fun. I love it. That's the word for today.
It is the word for today. Thank you, Chris. Such a pleasure, a delight. And let's keep failing, eh? Together. I can't wait to hear about that, Ted.